Good. So, let us begin. So as I said today, we're not going to introduce anything really new. We're just going to expand on the concepts we already master, so to say. So grammatical cases and verbs. And then we're going to do a little bit of exercises, and then I'm going to introduce you to a type of Sumerian literary text, right, so to say. So let's begin. So far, we have studied all the Sumerian grammatical cases. So the terminative, the ergative, etc., etc. We have spent a considerable amount of time on them. So I say you should have a good grasp of them. So we have, I guess, three different kinds of grammatical cases. They are not created equal. So you have core cases, so to say, which would be the ergative and the absolutive. Why do we call them the core cases? I'm actually not sure. I didn't come up with a term, but I would say it's because they mark the doer, the agent, which is a very important, a core part of the sentence, and the object, if you have one, or the intransitive subject, if you do not have an object. Then what do you have? You have the adverbial cases. What are they? Why are they called that way? Because they mark an element that makes sense in relation to a verb. So they relate a verb to a noun phrase. So ablative, from, determinative, towards, locative a, directive e, flows to, by, up, in dative ra, for, to. And then you have nominal cases, like the equative, like, or the genitive. Now let's take the genitive. Why do we call this a nominal case? Because it explains the relationship between two nouns without involving any verb work. You have X and you have Y, and you say Y of X. The house of the king, the book of Gabriele, blah, blah, blah. So it's between two nouns and no verb included. So why is that important? Actually, it isn't, but I guess I would tell you about it. Now, this is very important, on the other hand. Thing is, it happens a lot that you have more than one case in the same noun phrase. So, for example, if you want to say, in the house of the king, house of the king, so you have the genitive, and in the house of the king. So you have both the genitive and the locative. Then you have another example here, towards the house of the king. So genitive, in this case, plus terminative. And the son of the god, which is also the subject. So it takes the ergative e. So it's genitive plus ergative. As you can probably tell, most of these constructions happen with the genitive, happen to be the genitive plus another case. So the genitive is kind of a different grammatical case. It happens more than the others, basically, and now we'll see the intricacies of it. So the thing is, when you have more than one case, the genitive comes before the other, like it is explained in this formula. So you have the noun, you use the ak, so a, and then the other case. Now we're going to talk about the K thing for a second, because I had told you that the way you spell the genitive is by repeating the last consonant, if it has one, and then putting the a, and the ak kind of disappears in such cases. Now we'll see why that is. Oh, and before that, well, I have some examples. So in the house of the king, as we have said, house of the king would be e, lugal, ak, and then we have in the house of the king. So the locative is, again, a. Let me get this, okay. So, e lugal ak means, again, the house of the king. And since the genitive comes first, you have it before the other case. And then you have a at the end, which is the locative. So altogether, you have ak, genitive, and a, locative, which usually, in cuneiform, is written in this way, just ka. and the first a is kind of elided. We'll see some more examples of that going forward. Now, towards the house of the king, same thing. House of the king remains the same with the genitive, and then you have the she. In this case, you have the genitive as la, so you repeat the last consonant and then you have an a, and then you have the terminative she. We use in she 3 usually. So nothing too complicated about this. And here, again, the son of the god, subject, ergative subject, dumu lugal, son, and king. So, oh, this shouldn't be lugal, this should be dinger. So the sentence is son of the king. I forgot to change it. So the son of the king, dumu, lugal, ak, and then the e.
Can I ask one question, please?
Sure.
See, in the second sentence,
Yes.
a lugal acts in that you have removed ak from that. That part I got a little bit confused. So if you can tell me again.
So the question is, why do we have the la here?
No, the question is why this ak has been omitted.
Okay, so the
from
thing
from this output.
Okay.
That is the question.
Oh, I didn't know you could write on the thing. That's you writing, yeah?
Oh yeah, just wait, I will clear
No,
it.
no problem.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
no problem, no problem. I didn't know that you could do it. So the genitive works in this way. This is how the genitive usually appears. After a noun, if the noun ends in a consonant, then you only add the a, and you never add the k. So in cuneiform writing, you add the a, not the k, and you continue the last consonant. So it's like having the beginning of the genitive without the last k. So the thing is, the genitive is not elided; it's still written as la, which would be the l of the word lugal, and then the a of ak, but the k does not appear here.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, it's not easy to wrap one's head around, but yeah, it's not the clearest thing, I guess. Instead, here, when you have a case that starts and ends in a vowel, the K appears and the A disappears. In fact, here, ak, e, so genitive and ergative, are represented as K4 without the initial A. But let's see about that. Okay. So this is about that. So very often you have genitive constructions, so the son of the king, etc., used as subject of the sentence. So they have to be in the ergative. So they take a final e. Is that it? Oh, this is precisely what we were talking about. So we have studied that the suffix of the genitive is ak, and that it loses its final k after a noun, of course, if it ends in a consonant. So lugal kalam ma, kalam means land. Lugal kalam a without the k, king of the land. So this is how it looks in cuneiform, sorry, in transliteration, and it doesn't have the k. Same thing here, e, too, which means temple, and lilla, temple of Enlil, which is like God. The last la is nothing but the a of the genitive without the last k. However, if this sentence were to be the subject of the sentence, so if the house of Enlil was the subject, or the king of Ur was the subject, then we would have the genitive and then the ergative. In which case, the k would be written to basically divide the genitive case from the ergative. And the a instead would get elided. So it very much often appears as k, which is again k from the genitive and e from the ergative case. And this is how it looks. Now, if you have studied the cuneiform characters I have been putting in the homework, you would notice that the K looks sort of similar to the, oh, never mind, we have more, okay, to the A2, which means temple. So I thought I would include this. They probably share the same origin, as in at some point they probably were the same sign, and then they developed into two distinct ones. The K is also the sign for Lil 2, used in Enlil, and can also be read as Ge. So at some point it gained probably some other readings, while this one stayed A2. So what did I have here? Oh yeah, some more examples. So Dumu Lugal La, the son of the king, again, Dumu Lugal Ak without the K. Dumu Lugal K4, the son of the king, ergative. So it's Dumu Lugal Ak plus the K. So the A kind of disappears and you have the K for contraption. And this is again how it looks like. And this happens with the locative as well. So when you have ak, so genitive plus a, locative, you get ka. So again, the first a gets elided. So you do have ka as a contraption, which is locative, sorry, genitive plus locative, and ak plus a, which can be both the directive and the ergative. Any case that ends in a. So e lugal ka in the house of the king, which is e lugal, house of the king, ak, and then the a. Or e lugal ke, by the house of the king, which could be the directive or again, for some reason, the subject of the sentence as well. So e lugal ak, and then the e, which becomes ke. And again, this is what the two signs end up looking like in old Babylonian times, I think. Before that, this is basically their development from the most primordial versions up to the most aesthetically pleasing, aka Assyrian. Now, let's talk about final consonant sounds, or Auslaut, as you say in German. So this is a phenomenon that we're going to talk about. Auslaut basically means exiting sound. And let's see what it's all about. So as you can see, when you have a word or a case, for this reason, that ends in a consonant, the consonant is often not written. Now, why is that? We can't really be sure. But what we know is that in Sumerian, you tend to write words without their last consonant. It doesn't happen for all words, but some words, a lot of them, especially when they are monosyllabic, they are written and understood in transliteration as consonant-less, as in they do not have the last consonant. For example, hug means ore or silver. Now, this is what it's probably pronounced, hug with a final G. However, in writing, it's understood as Q3. Shag means heart, and Sha3 is how it's written in cuneiform. Nging is night, and Gi6 is how it is written. Now, you might say, well, how do you know that? Basically, what happens is when you have a case following them, so the word doesn't end in a vowel anymore, sorry, in a consonant anymore, then the consonant appears again. So let's say you have a case that ends in a vowel, a or e. You have kuk, which again, if the word ends with the consonant, is written as ku, 3. However, if it is continued by a case that should end in a consonant, then the G appears again. So of silver, kug ak is written ku ga, because the G is not the last consonant anymore. And which one is it? It's the K of the genitive. Same thing with heart. So shag ak becomes shaga.
Shaka, yeah.
Yeah, it's a common word, so you might have seen it in Hittite or Akkadian as well.
Yeah. I just think it is a doubling, duplicating the G sound.
Not actually. No.
Uh,
You know, how you write cuneiform is not a good indicator of Sumerian morphology. That's the problem.
Actually, yeah.
So, but yeah, it's a good point. Kind of look like it. I have a question in the chat. Okay, 1 second. Is the final consonant of a suffix also pronounced? That's a very good question. Now the thing is, so he's asking, is the final consonant of a suffix, so the K in ak, also pronounced, hugak? Probably yes. However, we can't be sure about that. And pronunciation, so how the language is spoken and pronounced, is not very well reflected by the writing system, so cuneiform. So understanding how it's written and understanding how it's spoken are, I would say, two different things. However, we know how we have to write and what the writing rules are, but we cannot be sure about pronunciation. However, I can talk about this in the next lesson or in the homework. I think there is good evidence to say that the last consonant sound is probably pronounced, but for some reason just not present in the writing. So yes, kug-ak is probably pronounced kug-ak, but in the writing it is written without the last consonant. Thank you for the question. It was a really interesting one. No problem. So now let's talk about the verbs a little bit. So I know the verbs have been frustrating some of you. It's been a nightmare for some with the verbs. They're not the easiest thing. So I guess I would spend some more time talking about them. Starting with some generalities, I think. Yes. So let's start with the very basics. So you have a verb, and if you want to conjugate it, so you want to say I do, you do, he does. So you take the verb to do and you want to make it into a verb that can take a subject and the object, so it can work in a sentence. You have to add something to it. And this is what we call a conjugation prefix, a CP, so to say. We have seen mu, we have seen e. They are used quite interchangeably. However, some appear more in some contexts, and we're going to see about them. You also have other ones like babi and imma, which we have not talked about this. We'll do in the next class. And yeah, so CPs are what habilitates a verb, I would say, to be used in a sentence. Now, Sumerian verbs are either transitive or intransitive. So transitive means it takes a direct object. So I eat the apple. The apple is the object. Or intransitive, which can mean that the verb doesn't have any object. Like I would say, I blush, I stink, I cry. So no object. Or the object is indirect or prepositional in English, you would say. Why? Because it's introduced, but by what we understand as a preposition. So I go to the store, I give it to him, etc., etc., etc. So those would be intransitive, while the transitive ones take a direct object without any preposition. And Sumerian verbs are conjugated differently, so there are different conjugations, different suffixes and prefixes, depending on whether the verb is transitive or not. And another aspect is Sumerian verbs don't have grammatical tense inside of them. So you can say I do, and that means both I did, I do, and I will do, depending again on the context. But what is important is grammatical aspect. So whether the action is complete, like I did, or I will have done, or incomplete, like I used to do, I was doing, or I will be doing, where you have an action that isn't over yet. This is how we distinguish verbs in Sumerian. So the incomplete actions are what we call imperfective, because they are not perfect, so to say, actions. And we call them maru. Why do we call them maru? Because the Akkadians, who themselves studied Sumerian, they call them that way. Now, I think that maru translates to heavy or fatty, because again, the action weighs pounds because it's not over. So you can't slide through it, it's heavy. And it usually describes, I mean, when it's used, it usually describes a present or a future action. Not always, but when you're talking about an imperfect verb, it's usually I am doing, I will be doing, but also I was doing in the past. So you have a imperfective transitive conjugation, if the verb is transitive, and an imperfective intransitive conjugation, if the verb is intransitive. Then you have completed actions. So the action is over and done with. And this is what we call the hamtu, which again, the Akkadian grammarians refer to as, and it means, I think, slim, fast, quick, maybe. So why? Because, well, the action doesn't wait much because it's done with. So, yeah. And when you use it, it's usually to describe a complete past action. So I did, I had done at some point, but also like future actions. I will have done something that happens on the spot and also ends on the spot. So you also have a perfective transitive conjugation, if the verb is transitive, or a intransitive conjugation, perfective, if the verb is intransitive. So right now we have 4 conjugations. Now we have a 3 here, it should be a 4. So 4 distinct conjugations on the basis of aspect and transitivity. However, the intransitive conjugations, so perfective intransitive and imperfective intransitive, are the same conjugation, which makes everything easier, because then you have only the imperfective transitive conjugation, the perfective transitive conjugation, and the intransitive one, which could be both imperfective or perfective. So it's only 3 of them, basically. Good. So let's take a look at them, I guess. So this would be the perfective transitive conjugation. So verbs that describe a complete action, aka what we call the hamtu in Akkadian. You usually add something before the verb, and then in the plural, you add something before and after. So in the first person singular, you have something or nothing. We can't really know, judging from cuneiform alone. You probably don't pronounce anything, so it's the lack of things, maybe a glottal stop, but you have a void space before the verb. So just mu'ak, I did. The second person is mu'e-ak, so you put the e before the verb. Now the e can change to any vowel, depending on what the verb starts with and what comes before. So you have mu'u-ak, maybe, and could also be mu'a'ak. But the thing is, you understand it's the second person because you have a distinct vocalic sound before it. Then you have the person class third person, which is a n before the verb, so moon-ak, and the b for the non-person class, so objects or cattle, anything that doesn't breathe and isn't human, moob-ak. So you have the final b here. Now, for the plural, it's basically the same thing, except you add something after it. So for the first person, it's enden. For the second is enzen. And for the third is esh. And well, doesn't change from singular to plural for the non-person class. It's just move and then the verb. So this is how it looks like. And I say, if you make a little chart, you write it somewhere, then you look at the verbs. It's not entirely difficult to understand whether they are in the Hamt or not, judging by the prefixes and suffixes. And yeah, so every person is quite distinct. So you can, tell them apart. So moving on. Now we have imperfective actions, transitive, of course. Now, some verbs change from hamtu to maru. So from perfective to imperfective. And we have seen how in lesson 4. So some get a suffix, some get reduplicated, some change, like they look different, some don't change at all. Ak doesn't change, so it stays the same. But again, if you want to go, just look at lesson 4, you'll see like the changes and stuff. In the homework, I point out when they change, so no problem. But that's one more thing to study, I guess. So in this conjugation, you don't add anything before, you just add it afterwards. So for the first and second person singular, you have n after the verb, so iak n. And for the third person, you have e. Whether it's non-person or person class, you just says e for everything. Then for the plural, you just add enden and enden, like this. They look very similar. Actually, this looks the same because you probably have nothing before and enden. And we know for a fact there is nothing before this and still enden. So they look virtually the same. Enden and then in. So again, quite straightforward. Takes some, time to understand, but it's doable. And then we have, well, the intransitive conjugation, which again could be both in the perfective or imperfective. So you have to look at the verb and at the context. And yeah. So, and how does it look? You have the n for the second and first persons. You don't have anything on the third person, so just idu. I go idu n. Could also be idu un because of vocalic change, but idu n. And again, idu enzen, and then they look very similar, all of them. The first and second persons of basically all the conjugations look really similar to like each other. So you have enzen and enden here, here, and here. So not a lot of things to study there. And then for the third person plural, you have the esh. So idu esh, they go. Idu enzen, idu enden. So yeah, there's that. Moving on. And this is where I add something new and potentially traumatizing. So we have studied that we have different prefixes here in the perfective, and they are a marker of grammatical person. However, in the writing, they are very often left out. So, ngae, I, the temple, mudu, I have built the temple. You have nothing here, as you should have, because again, the first person doesn't take anything. So it looks about right. But then you have the second person, zai, you, the temple, mudu, you have built the temple. However, here we should see a, but we don't see it in the writing. So how do we know it's in the second person? In this case, we just look at the subject, so you. And why is that, you may ask? Well, we can't be sure, but probably the e gets sucked into the final vowel of the preceding element, so into the u. So it should be there, but we don't have it in the writing. Yet another reason to distinguish between how Sumerian is written and how it is pronounced. And then we have the third case, which is the most frustrating. Lugal e, because it's in the ergative, so the king, e2, the temple, mudu, has built. So the king built the temple. We should be seeing an N, but the N disappeared. Same thing with the B for the inanimate class. This same thing happens. Now, why is that? We are not sure. It might have developed into a different sound, probably a nasal sound, or the scribe could just be very lazy, or maybe they didn't have enough space to write on, so they left it out. There are multiple options, and yeah. So we can't know for certain. What we do know is that subject is king, as always. So you have to understand things by subject. You see who the subject is. A very simple way of looking at it is by seeing the ergative and after what noun it is placed. So if you see the subject here, after lugal, then you know lugal is the subject because it is in the ergative case. So, okay. Now, we haven't really talked about the verb to be, but why is that? Mostly because it's very infrequent. They don't use it a lot. And it's also very easy. It's not a real verb. It can be used as a real verb. But the way we see it now is not. So what do we have here? We have the verb to be, which is me. And it is used as a suffix, basically, following this formula. So you have word number one, word number two, and then is, or what, are, am. And this means X is Y. So let's see some examples. Ngai, I, lugal, the king, men. Men is the copula, the to be. So I am the king. X, Y is. Ngai, lugal, men. Same thing for the second person, you are the king. The third person looks vaguely similar to English am, you know, So ane, he, lugal, am. He is the king. Then we have first person plural, menden, lugal, menden. How creative of Sumerians. Menden, lugal, menden again. So menden here acts as a verb, the suffix. We don't know about the second person plural. We do think it's enzen or mensen, but we can't be sure. It doesn't really happen that much in written records. So we can't be certain about that. And the third person, plural, mesh. Ane, ne, lugal, mesh. They are kings. So in short, I have prepared here a table with the cuneiform writings as well. So we can basically conclude that the suffix men means I am or you are. Am is it is, she is, or he is. Can be written both as am3, which is another reading of am, which is also an and dingir, or am6, which is a plus an. So look out for that. Menden, again spelled syllabically, me and the in, me, in, the, in, and they are, again, mesh. Now, some people consider this one single cuneiform character. Doesn't really make a difference. Good. So what else do we have? Good, now this is the interesting part, I guess. So let's talk about the tablets we'll be translating, because I believe we have arrived to the point where we can stop focusing that much on grammar, and we can finally, alas, look at real life examples of Sumerian. So congrats to everyone who made it to this point. And let's see what we have. So there is this amazing book called A Sumerian Christomathy by Conrad Folk. It's a truly amazing book, a game changer for Sumerology, I believe. And I have it right here. You can find the free version, it's free PDF on archive.org. I have included the link. Or if you wish to buy the paperback, you can get it on Amazon. Now, I wish I had some sort of partnership, but I don't. Sad. But again, we'll be taking tablets from this book. Know why? Because this book is meant for students. And if you can see my camera, the tablets are really well written. And most importantly, they treat different genres. So you have literary tablets, you have tablets of economic nature, legal nature. So there's quite a lot in the book. And we'll be taking a look at, mostly tablets from this volume and another one. And yeah, so you guys, if you want, download it from archive.org. Or if you want to get it, the real the physical version, if you like books like me, you can get it on Amazon or by other means if you so desire. Moving on, let's talk about the decouture inscriptions for once. So these would be the first kind of inscriptions we're going to look at in the course. Now, this one is on a cylinder, while the other one is on a mud brick. They look really beautiful, don't they? So, what are they all about? To understand them, we have to talk about, well, temples in Mesopotamia. So Mesopotamia is, well, an interesting place. Without real mines or ores, without real forests, so no wood either. So what do you build with? Mud and clay, mostly mud. So a lot of temples, just like, well, cities and ziggurats, although they're Akkadian, were built with, well, mud and other, well, very much primordial elements. So when you build with mud, you have to take into account that it's not a really good material for building, and it gets, goes bad real fast. So you have to do a lot of rebuilding work, and that became kind of a special and important aspect of Sumerian culture. Why? Because when you build a temple, the temple is gonna, well, deteriorate with time. So kings have to constantly, rebuild temples. And that becomes, well, a act of not just propaganda, but something kings and, well, rulers are expected to do to keep, gods favorable, and, well, by, again, restyling and rebuilding what is to be rebuilt. So it's a big thing, socially speaking, and it gets quite important. And we have a lot of tablets that talk about how kings and rulers reconstruct temples, and what do they write them on? Well, tablets, but also on the very bricks they used to do the constructions. So you would see the temple, which, by the way, looks like a normal house. That goes for most temples. Sometimes it's bigger, sometimes it's more decorated, but essentially a house. And on the house, you would have mud bricks, and on them you would have inscriptions. And for some reason, they also had cones. They would just write on the cones and then put the cones inside the temple or below the temple. And then the following kings would kind of dig them up and see them and read them and be like, okay, oh, so this king carried out rebuilding endeavors before me. So to keep the historicity of the whole thing. So these will be the first kind of tablets we're going to delve into. Now, what about them? Well, one thing is they all follow a standard format. This, by the way, is how we're going to look at the tablets. We don't need to look at real tablets. We have drawings of them, which are much clearer. We're going to do a little bit of both, though. So they all follow a standard format. So they all write like a legal procedure. You can't write documents the way you want. You have to follow some instructions, some guidelines. Same thing for this, which is by all means something borderline legal. Well, so the language of such instructions is formulaic, so it follows artificial or mechanical, so to say, rules. So it doesn't really resemble how people speak, just like you don't speak like Shakespeare writes a book. And he didn't speak like that, of course, but it does write it in a way that sounds more elegant. Same thing for these tablets. And, well, how do they start? They start with a benefactive sentence. So they start by saying to whom the rebuilding is dedicated to what god, to what divinity. Then you say the name of the king and the titles, the honorific charges of the king. So king of God, king of what? So king of Sumer, king of what city? And then you say, well, the object, and then the verb at the end. And this is an example. So the first two lines of this tablet would be the benefactive phrase, so the dedication. Then you have 3 lines of subject, so the doer of the sentence, who the king is, then the object, and then the verb. So in this case, we have for Dumutzida, which is a god. We'll be talking about gods in a later lesson in partnership again with Florian, the historian that guided us through Mesopotamian history on the first class. So for Dumutzida, his mistress, Gudea, the ruler of Lagash, his temple of Girtsu is a quarter inside of the city of Lagash, he built for her. So this is what a tablet looks like, a dedicatory tablet looks like usually. So we're going to do a little bit of that. before delving into more complicated tablets. And now I have more examples here. So we have a question in the chat. Let's see. Mistress or master? Aurelio asks. Well, in this case, the sign they used is nin, which means lady, mistress. So in this case, a mistress, I guess, or a she master, if anything. But yes. So yeah. Now, if you're wondering what these tablets say, the response would be you're gonna figure out very shortly, because this is gonna be your homework for 2 weeks from now. So good luck. And this should be fairly more satisfying than the rough and not very fun sentences I have been giving you so far. So this should step up the game. From now on, it gets very much more interesting. And this also concludes the presentation. So I hope you found well, interesting what we talked about today, this refreshment before.
So
yes,
is it the end of the whole grammar
no, it's not the end of the whole grammar explanation. However, the fundamentals, the bases should be well established after this. And now it's all a matter of getting to know the vocabulary more and the whole prefixes. We have more prefixes we haven't talked about, and different things. So there is still a lot to look at. But while we do that, we can also start having fun translating real tablets. That's the main thing. But yes, we have come a long way already. I would say we are halfway in the course. No, I haven't figured out when the exact end will be, but we have covered a lot of ground. Basically, now you're now allowed to actually drive the car. Yes. Now you need some field experience, I guess. Aurelio is totally mad about this.
One question.
Sure.
Yeah, I wanted to know if we'll be reading the actual from actual photographs of the clay tablet, or we'll be reading using these images, or both kind of the things we'll be practicing.
At the beginning, I would say it's better to look at the drawings for a simple reason. Cuneiform is a lot simpler if written through drawings, especially at the very beginning when you're not very skilled with it. I think it's very beneficial to read through that. However, we are going to see tablets that don't really have an official an official drawing. So we might actually end up doing it ourselves. So yes, we'll be doing both. And that is for mere didactic reasons, I would say. Thank you for the question. So we have 10 minutes left, and I would love to do something with you all. I would love to go over some of the sentences I have given you through the weeks and kind of analyze them and see how it's done, how I would do it. So I say we can make it an informal part of the lesson. We can probably stop recording, and then I can show you my screen, my desktop, and all things of that sort. And we can do that without, too much professionality. So Aurelio, if you can stop the lesson, sorry, the recording, and we can go on to do that.
Will do. Hang on.